Oh, hi, it's Bruce Rouse here from the Sustainability Education Academy. I'm also interviewing someone with my same name but different spelling, Henham Rouse. So I think you're the first Rouse I've ever interviewed, Henham. Very nice to have
That's a
you on
rare
the call.
privilege. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, Henham, before I
Sure.
ask my questions?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am obviously Australian, but have spent a lot of time in the UK. Hence why my accent's a little bit warped. And I grew up in the Western districts of Victoria, so farming background, Black Angus. So I've seen you guess you develop a little bit of knowledge about the circular economy from a very early age and what that means, the great sort of circle of things. Have been working across various number of industries over my career, touching from hospitality to hedge funds through to energy efficiency and in particular sort of now the energy markets with a new job starting at AGL very soon. So quite a broad experience is a way I describe my career trajectory, Bruce.
Yeah. Certainly, you've got a great sort of broad experience now, and I think nowadays it's really useful to have that kind of broad experience because careers change quickly, and often we have multiple careers. And having a broad experience, you can bring fresh ideas in and stuff like that. So great. And I need to congratulate you on recently completing the investment grade energy auditor full series of courses and the provisional certification.
Yes, absolutely.
Congratulations.
Thank
Um,
you.
yes. Why did you take that course?
So the business I was working with at the time, we effectively offering ourselves as a consultancy service and looking to then assist companies on net zero journeys. And as part of that, the business decided that actually what would be really good is to actually have some more in-house internal expertise, so we could actually talk the talk a little bit more rather than just sort of pull in the experts as required. So and because I'd worked in energy efficient before in voltage power optimization in the UK, it was a sort of natural fit to sort of continue on that education. And it was a really fantastic, comprehensive course because it went right through the scope of the obvious stuff like LEDs, which I think a lot of people are familiar with, given all the sort of the free services out there or the offers. But right through to the more interesting complex systems like industrial HVAC systems and steam and things that you wouldn't necessarily normally cover unless you're a sort of an engineer per se. So yeah, that was the idea behind sort of taking the course to extend our range of skills and our sort of service offering to our customers.
Great. And what can I just question with two sides here? What did you
Yes,
like and what did you dislike about the course? I want to hear both
sure.
sides. Yeah.
Yes. So it's again probably two sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
The fact that the course was very comprehensive in terms of the content, and sort of the resources that came along with it. The the other thing is the questions at the end were actually quite challenging. So getting your head around the actual answer and those sort of multiple layers of to try and get to the answer, which was great in terms of really challenging your understanding. That was really fantastic. The bit that was hard though is probably trying to wade through the actual resources that were there and work out what was actually really going to be relevant and what was sort of more as a nice to know background information, because you could go down effectively 3 or 4 levels depending on your desire to sort of understand a particular topic or a particular section of, again, I'm say steam, for instance, and some of the dynamics around that, or something like the lighting, where they started to get into all sorts of complex algorithms and going back into cosine. So that was a little bit difficult and frustrating trying to work out how much I actually need to know to be competent versus becoming a sort of so-called expert in that in that particular section. So that was a bit hard to know whether or not I was wasting too much time going down a rabbit hole unnecessarily. So that was probably the thing that probably would need to be just sort of tightened up, if you will.
Yeah. Okay. Appreciate that. Thanks. And so
Hopefully that was clear.
yeah. That's clear. I think also you had some problems with because the always changing the landscape. I think a couple of resources, some of the links may have needed
Of
updating and
course, yeah,
stuff like that. So
that was yeah.
yeah. Anyway, you were a fantastic student because you gave a lot of feedback along the way, which is brilliant. Yeah. So thank you, Hannah, and I'm glad you enjoyed the course, despite finding it a little bit frustrating, and you persisted and you went through, and hopefully that gives you a lot more confidence now around energy efficiency as you move forward. So now my next question is around continued professional development, and around kind of your thoughts around this, because clearly you've had a wide range of experiences.
Yes.
What is ongoing learning? What do you see the role of ongoing learning being in terms of your career, and
Sure.
how important do you see it?
Yeah, I think there's two elements that I sort of reflect upon. One is that from particularly this sort of what I describe as the technical energy space, having some form of technical knowledge is effectively essential if you want to sort of get a role in certain parts of the energy ESG industry. So I think it's sort of to give you an example, I just caught up with an old colleague who did his CEC solar installation training online, how to design, and he recently took on a new job, and he literally said, if I hadn't had that accreditation, I wouldn't have even been considered for the role. So there's one element there of having that professional development education is going to be essential in terms of getting that those jobs or those particular types of jobs. But the other thing, which I would argue is probably more important, and certainly what I feel is more important, is for any employee to see someone who's not just sort of done their bachelor's and then that's the end of their sort of educational. I think for employers, they'll pick on the fact that there's someone who's motivated to continually learn and continue to expand their knowledge and expertise. I think for me that's a more important signal, particularly for employer, because that it shows that someone's still keen to learn, still trying to develop and grow as a person and add to their skill set. So for me, that's probably the most important thing about that continuing professional development side.
Okay. So how would you contrast that versus, say, just jumping online and using ChatGPT if you wanted to learn about something? Yeah. So going through, say, a course which is structured and perhaps in some cases, as you've alluded to, maybe a little bit frustrating because there's a lot of resources you've got to go through them, versus, say, just jumping on a ChatGPT and knowledge when you need it. Basically, how do you compare them? And do you think courses still have a role? Do you think courses still have a role nowadays?
Yes, I think 100%, because the thing is we've all not we've all experienced with ChatGPT, but as a good example, I mean, ultimately, when they talk about sort of garbage in, garbage out, I mean, obviously it's a very useful tool, but you also need to appreciate that actually some of the where it gets some of the input will affect what the output is, and if you're just relying on that external element rather than something that's a bit more structured, then you actually can't go with full confidence to know that what's actually the output is actually accurate to a point. So there's a role for both of them. But if you've got some of that sort of structured learning element, it also gives you that sort of foundational base to then, when you get the output from using a ChatGPT, say, oh, hang on a second, that doesn't actually quite add with my understanding. So it puts you in a stronger position to actually I guess query and question where you think there might be discrepancies. Because I'll give you a small example. It's not relevant, but my brother went on ChatGPT and asked ChatGPT to create 10 questions for his 6-year-old daughter to do with maths, and it did a great job. But then actually one of the answers was actually incorrect. So it's certainly not a perfect thing. So you still ultimately, whether it's a structured course or whether it's using like ChatGPT, I mean, ultimately it comes down, you need to check your work. So if you're relying on one or the other, then you're still going to get yourself in trouble. So
yep. My son, who's a bit older than your brother's daughter, but he said the same thing. ChatGPT is terrible at maths. Really interesting. If we're just jumping back to certifications, because you've got this provisional investment grade energy auditor certification. How often do you see that employees are looking for certifications now? Employers are looking for certifications, sorry. Mhm.
I think they're always going to be looking for some certification, and whether that's not your primary degree is sort of hard to say. I mean, I think knowing what I've experienced, not coming from a mechanical engineer or electrical engineering background, I think if you're interested in the energy transition, if you've got that foundational degree in electrical engineering or an engineering degree, you're almost a shoe-in for so many different roles within the industry. I think because I didn't come from that background, the courses that I've done, like yourself, and I've also done one on sustainability and climate risk. I think they're really important in sort of trying to separate myself from other candidates in roles. So yeah, I do think it's very important. But I would sort of stress that it depends almost on your primary degree as to in terms of how important. If someone has as I say, if someone has an electrical engineering degree, they may not need to sort of do an energy auditing course for them to pick up the role, because again, it's more about the skill sets and the knowledge they've learned in their structured learning prior, which would be sort of enough for a lot of employees to set. Yeah. As I say, if you haven't got that, then courses like yourselves become much more important.
Okay. And what would your advice be then to aspiring people who want to work in the sustainability sector, yes, or the energy transition? What's your advice to these people that they want to work in this sector? Yeah. Can you give me just 1 or 2 or 3 points of advice to them?
I'll give you 3 points. So I mean, I won't say the obvious, which is obviously to take your course and do that. But aside from the obvious, I think there's a couple of practical things that I think is really helpful. One is to actually the simplistic thing of actually like read Renew Economy every day. So Renew Economy is a fantastic website, all to do with the energy efficiency, the energy transition, what's going on in the grid. They have half a dozen articles come out every single day about what's going on. So I think the more you can sort of get yourself up to scratch about what's happening in the network in terms of also new tech, that's a great way, because then whenever you meet someone, you've actually got something relevant to ask some questions about, depending on which area of field they're in. The second thing I was is LinkedIn is a fantastic place to get news, to learn about new tech and things going on in the market, and sort of on the back of that is also an opportunity to expand your personal network. Because I mean, ultimately, like everything, it's a people business. So the more people you know or follow or have some sort of insights to what they're up to, the more chance you are of finding a role in a desirable spot, whether it's through a bit of serendipity or just through actually reaching out direct. So I would encourage people to be on almost LinkedIn every day, just to sort of get so rather than scrolling through TikTok, that would be my suggestion. And I guess the third thing is again, it's that sort of cliche sort of reaching out with your own internal network and seeing who knows who, and I guess trying to reflect on where you've actually got an interest in the energy space, because it's so broad, from the sustainability side through to the energy transition, right through to more of the the social governance side, depending on where you sit on the spectrum. So you've got to ideally sort of know where you're most interested in playing, and then sort of follow that path.
Right. So to summarize, know where you want to play, follow that path. Probably you alluded to right at the start, get some sort of go do some short courses or get some sort of certification in that area. If you're in Australia in particular, go to Renew Economy every day, which is a fantastic website. I agree with you. And also, even if you're overseas, but it's mostly focused on the energy transition in Australia. And then also the third one was, leverage LinkedIn. Yeah, I think great advice. Thank you. So let's now look, if you're already in a sustainability career, what are the biggest challenges you think that are facing people working in sustainability?
I think right now, I think one of the biggest challenges is that if you're not in a sort of listed company, so to speak, whether, we can keep it broad in terms of an international company in the sense of whether it's on the ASX or whether it's the S&P or, somewhere in Europe. The challenges are at the moment are multifaceted, which is often means that ESG is not necessarily high on the priority list right now. And so I think that's an external challenge, which is hard to sort of overcome internally. But what I've experienced that, yes, people sort of want to be more sustainable, they want to be more energy efficient, but when they're dealing with higher interest rates, lower revenues, and it's very hard to sort of fly the flag for this as a priority, in spite of everything we've heard from the IPCC and other relevant bodies, and then the news that keeps coming out. I think there's still that massive challenge of trying to get that up the priority list. So I think that's a big challenge. Internally here in Australia, sort of following on from that, there's definitely, from speaking to other people, there's definitely been a sort of slowdown in things, and therefore there's sort of the challenge hasn't gone away, but the impetus to do something when people are sort of fighting fires is quite difficult. So I don't know if that articulates it very well, but I think that's probably the biggest challenge. The second challenge would be that there's so many moving parts. It's very hard right now, and we don't work all as one. Each state has its own rules and politics and sort of how they want to tackle this. So I think it's a big challenge to know what the next sort of 12 months will bring versus what it might look like in 24 months. You haven't got that sort of clear cut, here's our plan, here's what we're going to do, and this is the way we're going to do it. And then it's just a case of then finding the right people to actually implement it. There's still a lot of politics going around about what's right, the best way to do it, and greenwashing. So I think those things are a big challenge for anyone sort of trying to navigate at the moment. All those moving parts. It's a real challenge to work out how to influence things when policy can change and things might change and go 180, aka the New South Wales backflip on where wind farms are suitable and not suitable and all the rest of
it. Okay. So there's several challenges. Do you have any solutions to these challenges?
Well, my solution, the solution is to persevere and to not give up and to keep form of hope, because there is a lot of pressure coming down internationally to reduce carbon footprint. So the ESG at the sort of the listed company levels, that's still going to be there, and the pressure will continue there. So if you're in that type of environment, then there's naturally going to be that pressure, which will naturally bubble up to then make them force them into a course of action. And then from the other's perspective of all the moving parts, you just have to remain flexible in terms of what you're doing, and just keep your eye out that you might be going down a particular rabbit hole of, say, a particular technology, and that might be superseded or might get changed 90 degrees, 180 degrees in the next 12, 24 months, and you just have to be flexible and accept that there's going to be a few bumps along the road, and it's not going to be a smooth path.
Interesting. So I guess also kind of reflecting a bit on what you've said. So on the one hand, we have the EU with its carbon border adjustment mechanism.
Yes.
And then we also have the pressures around disclosure for larger companies around a disclosure of their carbon footprint. And that's becoming, I believe it's becoming mandatory now in several places where you have to disclose your carbon footprint. And I guess then, what is your carbon footprint? Well, that's Scope 1 emissions, which are your direct combustion of fuels and so on. Scope 2, which is your use of electricity, which is generated off-site, but you're purchasing electricity. And then finally, you've got your Scope 3 emissions, which are your value chain, whether from your suppliers or your distributors or so on. And so I guess just thinking through this, is perhaps one of the things that's going to keep on driving momentum is these major businesses have to report, and they've all got Scope 3 emissions. The Scope 3 emissions then flow down to their supply chain, which is often smaller businesses and mid-sized businesses. So does that kind of give you some sort of sense of optimism that, yes, so we've got such an momentum now around climate change and now reporting on your carbon footprint, and then are you confident that that's going to flow down and kind of have and not just a trickle down, a kind of a hose down effect to
Yes.
to force more interest in this?
Yes, I do. And I think sort of subsequent to that, in terms of when you talked about solutions, the other thing I would sort of put out there is that there are very clear examples, whether it be something like LED lighting or potentially a HVAC upgrade or other sort of energy efficiency elements there, where there is a valid business case today to get things done. So almost sort of irrespective of the carbon argument and the scope 1, 2, or 3 emissions and where that sort of sits, that there are things out there that people can do today that are practical and make economic sense. So the sort of the carbon element is very important, and that will continue that pressure. I think you're right; it will start to trickle down, or eventually maybe hose down into those smaller businesses that support the larger businesses. But ultimately, that will happen, and I'm confident that will happen, and that will give people confidence in the industry in terms of, okay, we're definitely on the right path, or I'm in the right industry. But as I just say, that there is that opportunity today to actually have an impact. So if you can find those reasonable business economic case where you've got paybacks of sort of under 3 years, then you're in with a good shot to actually make a positive change and affect the carbon reduction program.
Well, that's fantastic. I love that plug for energy efficiency there. That's fantastic. Because, and realistically, let's look at something which has, say, a 10-year life and it's got a 3-year payback. Gosh, that's a really good investment, isn't it? Because over the 10 years, you're going to get a fantastic return on your capital on that bit of plant or equipment or light or whatever it is that you've upgraded. So this is my last question now. Reflecting on your considerable experience across a range of sectors, but focusing particularly on sustainability or energy efficiency, do you have a project that you can share or talk about which has had a significant positive impact? And if you just want to come up with a project and talk a bit about the impact that project might have had, and just share the joy of that project and yeah.
So I think last year, 2022, I worked on a large project involving a solar rollout and also a hot water heat pump, as well as some split system air conditioning units. So we were effectively retrofitting houses for Aboriginal housing in Victoria. So quite a large capital project, and quite tight deadlines. Within the idea is to sort of be done and dusted within sort of 6 to 8 months to make use of all the subsidies and the like. And we ended up sort of rolling out. Not every property got each of those upgrades, but we ended up touching over sort of 700 properties, all of them getting some form of upgrade. And I think what was really exciting about it is that we're making a real difference in terms of people's energy bills, and we're obviously helping transition houses to have a lower carbon footprint, particularly when they install the solar. And so I think there was a huge positive impact from an energy efficiency point of view, and also by adding that solar, really adding to the renewables on the grid. So really proud to be involved in that project. It was very, very challenging for a number of different reasons, but we effectively overachieved what we'd planned to deliver. So much so that the company and the consultants that we're involved with actually gave us more work, which was meant to be done by another contractor who couldn't deliver, but because we were doing so well, they actually gave us additional houses to actually work on. So I think that was sort of a pretty proud moment to actually really feel like you're making a big difference over a number of Victorian houses. So yeah, that was a really positive experience.
That's a fantastic story, and yes, there's a lot of houses and a lot of impact, both from the heat pumps, which use a fraction of the energy of a gas system. An electric heat pump will save a lot of, I've actually had a lot of experience with heat pumps myself, as I'm measuring them, and believe me, the savings are really big. As well as putting in an air conditioning or reverse cycle air conditioning will save a lot of energy on gas heating as well, and a lot of money too. So great
And
outcome.
it's
Thank you.
also better for people's health as well. I mean, I think that's the sort of one of the big things that, in terms of my education and learning over the last sort of 18 months, listening to and reading up on people like Saul Griffiths and sort of electrification processes, just to understand that actually, gas heating and gas cooking is not sort of ideal for homes in terms of respiratory and sort of general health. So there's that other element to it as well, which I think is great to sort of replace some of those aspects of it.
Yeah, tremendous. Thanks for that uplifting story at the end, Hinam. Pleasure to speak to you, Hinam Rouse. Thank you very much for taking the time today to share your experience.
Such a pleasure, Bruce. Fantastic. Really appreciate it.
I will turn off the recording.